Look at your life. Really look at it. Not the I'm doing okay version you tell your parents and friends. Look at the parts that hurt. The job that drains your soul. The city that feels like a grey weight. The relationships that are just there. Most of you are not living the life you wanted, you know it. You feel it in that quiet moment right before you fall asleep when the phone is off and the room is dark. And yet, tomorrow morning you will wake up and do it all again. You will tolerate the boss you despise. You will drink the coffee that tastes like burnt rubber. You will complain to your friends, and then you will go back to the desk. Years pass like this. Entire lives evaporate. From the outside, from the perspective of a historian or an alien, this looks insane. If you hate it, why don't you change it? Why don't you leave? Why don't you revolt? Westerners love to talk about freedom of choice. You think people accept bad lives because they are brainwashed or uneducated. You think if people just had more information, they would rise up. That is such a lazy, arrogant way of looking at the world. It makes you feel superior, like you are the one who escaped the Matrix. But let me tell you something from the perspective of a man who grew up in the ruins of the Soviet Union. The real answer is much darker. It's not about fear, it's not about propaganda. People accept lives they hate because they have been perfectly trained to believe that nothing depends on them. I grew up around masters of this. I didn't grow up in a world of self-help. I grew up in a world of survival help. And the first thing you learn in that world is that your will, your desire, your passion, they are irrelevant. They are actually dangerous. I remember being a kid, maybe 8 years old. It was the 90s, the chaos years. The Soviet Union was gone, but the ghost was everywhere. I watched my neighbor, Uncle Vasya. He was a brilliant engineer, a man who could solve complex equations in his sleep, and yet for 3 years he wasn't paid, not a single ruble. He went to the factory every morning, he sat at his desk, he did his work. And at the end of the month, the manager would come out and say, "There is no money, maybe next month." Uncle didn't quit, he didn't protest, he just came home, sat in his kitchen and drank tea with my father. I asked my dad once, why does he go there if they don't pay him? My father looked at me with this expression I will never forget. It wasn't sadness, it was heavy. He said, because he has nowhere else to go, and because if he stays home, he has to admit that he is nothing. At the factory, he is at least an engineer who isn't being paid. That was my first lesson in feedback loops. If you try to work harder and you get nothing, your effort dies. If you speak the truth and nothing changes, your honesty dies. If you take initiative and it only brings you more work and more risk, your initiative dies. In the West, you are taught that hard work pays off. In Russia, we were taught that initiative is punishable. Инициатива наказуема. That is a phrase every Russian knows in their marrow. You aren't born cynical, you're educated into it. Every time you see a good person get crushed while the snake gets promoted, you learn a lesson. Every time you see the law being used to protect the powerful and punish the weak, you learn a lesson. After a while, you don't need a dictator, you don't need a secret policeman at your door. You have the lesson inside you. You start to police yourself, you start to lower your expectations until reality stops hurting so much. That isn't depression, it's adjustment. It's a survival mechanism. If you stop wanting, you stop hurting. I'll give you a personal example. Something I've never really talked about. When I was in school, we had these political information hours. We had to stand up and talk about the evils of imperialism and the greatness of our path. Everyone knew it was a lie. The teacher knew it, we knew it, our parents knew it. We could look out the window and see the cracked sidewalks and the lines for basic bread. We knew the path was broken. But here is the part that is hard to explain to a Westerner. We still did it. We stood up and we said the words, and we said them with a straight face. Why? Because the ritual was the point. The system didn't care if you believed the lie, it only cared that you were willing to repeat it. If you repeat a lie and you don't believe it, you're signaling your obedience, you're showing the state that you're manageable. When you do this long enough, you develop what I call the Soviet ear. You learn to hear the subtext. You learn that the public truth is just a theater, and the private truth is something you only say in the kitchen after the second bottle of vodka. The funny part is, I see this in the West now. I see it in your corporate offices. I see it in your HR meetings. Everyone is sitting around a table, nodding at some corporate jargon that everyone knows is absolute garbage. Synergy, company culture, impact. Nobody believes it, but everyone repeats it. You think you're free. You're performing the same ritual Uncle Vasya performed. You're trading your dignity for the comfort of not being the troublemaker. You're training yourself to accept a version of reality that you know is false. And once you accept the big lies, the small life you hate becomes much easier to swallow. People always ask me, if things were so bad, why didn't everyone just leave? Why did they stay? It's because of a phrase that is the most dangerous sentence in the human language. At least it could be worse. Пока что ничего. For now, it's nothing. I remember my grandmother. She lived through the war, she lived through the Stalin, she lived through the famine. To her, success was having a loaf of bread and a roof that didn't leak. If she had those two things, she was happy. She taught me that wanting more was a form of madness. Why are you complaining? She would say. You have shoes, you have a bed. In 1942, we ate bark from the trees. That logic is a trap. It uses the trauma of the past to justify the misery of the present. The system loves this. It keeps you in a state of perpetual gratitude for the bare minimum. You hate your job, well, at least you have a job. Think of the homeless people. You hate your apartment? Well, at least you aren't in a war zone. This is how societies become stagnant. We stop asking, is this life good? And we start asking, is this life survivable? And once survival is your only metric, your dignity becomes an expensive luxury you cannot afford. You start to defend your own misery because you're terrified that the alternative, the unknown, is even worse. Uncertainty is more frightening than misery. People will stay in a burning house if they think the yard is full of wolves. The Soviet system was very good at making the yard look like it was full of wolves. Another lie people tell is that you have to like a system to stay in it. I hated the system. Most of my friends hated the system. But hatred without agency doesn't lead to revolution. It leads to exhaustion. Imagine you're pushing against a massive concrete wall. You push with all your might. You scream, you curse the wall, you hate the wall with every fiber of your being. Does the wall move? No. Does your back hurt? Yes. Eventually you stop pushing. You don't stop hating the wall, you still hate it, but you stop pushing. You sit down in the dirt, you lean against the wall. Maybe you write a cynical joke on the wall with a piece of charcoal. That is what Russian cynicism is. It's the humor of the condemned. We have some of the best jokes in the world. They are dark, they are sharp, and they are brutal. But those jokes aren't a sign of resistance. They are a sign of defeat. They are an emotional release valve. You tell a joke, everyone laughs, you feel a little better for 5 minutes, and then you go back to the factory. The system doesn't mind your jokes, it doesn't mind your private criticism, as long as your anger stays in the kitchen, as long as it stays private, nothing changes. In the West, you have Twitter for this, you have your outrage cycles, you spend your day getting angry about things you cannot change, you feel like you're doing something because your heart rate is up, but you aren't doing anything, you're just venting steam. Anger is safe. Action is dangerous. The system has taught you that your opinion matters so that you don't realize your action is missing. I moved abroad about 2 years ago. I live in a place now where things actually work. The buses come on time, the police don't ask for bribes, if you work hard you actually get a promotion. And you know what the hardest part for me was? It wasn't the language, it wasn't the food, it was the future tense. In the Soviet mindset there is no future. There is only now and maybe later. You don't plan for 5 years, you plan for tomorrow, because you don't know if the laws will change, if the money will become worthless, or if the system will just decide to disappear. When you live without a future, you become short-term, you become selfish, you take what you can, while you can. I still have this post-Soviet panic. I'll be at the grocery store and I'll see a shelf full of my favorite yogurt, and a part of my brain screams, by 10, by 20, they might be gone tomorrow. I have to stop and tell myself, they will be here tomorrow. This is a normal country. But that smallness of time is how you accept a life you hate. You tell yourself, just a few more months, just until I get that bonus, just until the kids are out of school. Temporary becomes permanent very quietly. You look in the mirror and you're 50 years old, and you realize you've been waiting for things to stabilize for 30 years. You didn't live your life, you just survived the intervals between crises. Here is the most painful part. When you live in a society that has accepted its misery, the people around you become your jailers. If you decide to quit your job, or move to another country, or try to build something new, your friends won't cheer you. Not really. They will tell you why it's a bad idea. They will tell you it's unrealistic. They will remind you of all the risks. They aren't doing this because they hate you. They're doing it to protect themselves. If you succeed, it means that they could have succeeded too. If you escape, it means that they are the ones who chose to stay in the cage. Your bravery is a mirror that shows them their own cowardice. So they try to pull you back down. Stay with us, they say. Be realistic, don't be a dreamer, this is just how life is. We have a saying in Russia about the crab bucket. If you put one crab in a bucket, it will climb out. But if you put 10 crabs in a bucket, they will pull down anyone who tries to reach the top. I felt those claws on my ankles for years. I saw people who could have been artists, entrepreneurs, thinkers, and they were all pulled back into the grey mud of realism. The greatest trick a system can play is to make you believe that wanting more is a sign of immaturity, that being miserable is a sign of growing up. I want to end with a thought that haunts me every day. Most people are not waiting to be free, they are waiting to be comfortable. Freedom is terrifying. Freedom means you have to choose. Freedom means that if you fail, it's your fault. But inside a bad system, nothing is your fault. The system is the villain, the boss is the villain, the economy is the villain. You're just a victim, and being a victim is very, very comfortable. It gives you a moral high ground without you having to do any of the work. The Soviet Union was a nightmare, yes. But it was a predictable nightmare. You knew you would have a job, you knew you would have a flat, you knew you would have a pension. It was a life without dignity, but it was also a life without the terror of the blank page. This is the final lock. You stay in the life you hate because the life you want requires you to be responsible for your own soul. And most of us have been trained, from the red corner in school to the grey cubicle in the office, that we aren't capable of that. I'm not trying to convince you to go out and quit your job tomorrow. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm just a guy who escaped a system that was designed to make me a shadow. But I'm telling you this. The walls aren't as strong as you think they are. The secret policeman isn't in the closet. He's on your head. And the moment you stop saying, nothing depends on me, the moment you realize that survival is not the same thing as living, that is the moment the door opens. But you have to be willing to walk through it. And you have to be willing to walk into the wind, where there are no grandfathers to tell you what to do. Every day is a struggle to believe that my actions matter. But I'd rather struggle to be a man than be a perfectly adjusted ghost. Thank you for watching.